Most people think an amount like 4.1 million at age 62 means automatic retirement success and that you're set for life. And I'd say in most of those cases, that should generally be true. But I've seen firsthand how this scenario can just as easily become an anxiety trap or uncertainty trap. Because the truth is, retirement success is not just about the size of your 401k or your other investment balances. It's more about how you can turn that balance into a variable income stream, just depending on what's going on in your life year by year, without triggering adverse tax consequences, higher Medicare costs, or just other irreversible mistakes that you may not even realize the consequence of until later on. And if you're someone who's run your own numbers, you've studied some retirement strategies, maybe you've modeled a few scenarios already in Excel or Monte Carlo tools, but you still don't feel confident enough to really go into retirement and you're still not sure how it all fits together. Maybe you're already familiar with generic withdrawal strategies like the 4% rule, where you could already fill this in and say, well, 4% on $4 million, $160,000 a year, too generic. You're probably already past that, I'm guessing. So this video is for you. And if you're new to the channel, my name is Justin. I own a financial planning firm in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, where we help retirees all across the country make smart financial decisions and help them figure out how much they can realistically spend in retirement, depending on what's going on in their life in any given year. And I've worked with plenty of retirees where the situation looked, quote, perfect on paper as far as how much money that they had accumulated, but they were still delaying retirement because they just didn't trust the numbers and how it all fit together. It was just a big source of anxiety for them. And that's when I discovered large balances are powerful. That's great. It's definitely better than the opposite scenario, but it can be fragile if it's mismanaged or if it's just leading to constant questioning, delaying retirement. And the worst part is the problems don't show up in year one. They show up 5, 10, 15 years down the road when it's often too late to fix them. So that's why I'm making today's video. I'm not just going to give you just the generic spending numbers. I'm assuming you've been through all that before. I'm going to walk you through the decision framework that I use with many of my clients that helps turn just lots of pure information into more of a confidence layer that they can use to help make retirement decisions. So let's dig right into it. And so let's ground this with a real life case. So we'll call this the $4.1 million freeze. And for this video, we'll call the client, we'll call him John Sample. So John was 62, had a long executive career, high income, great saver, accumulated 4.1 million. Most of it is all in his pre-tax 401k. Had about 500,000 outside of it in a non-retirement brokerage account, mix of cash and CDs. No pension, not yet claiming Social Security. So on paper, it looked like he's ready or that he should be ready, but he just felt stuck. One calculator that he was looking at told him he could spend about $15,000 a month. Another he looked at said he shouldn't spend any more than $8,000 a month. A third tool that he used showed a probability chart that somehow left him a lot more anxious than before. Watched a whole bunch of YouTube videos, which I'm sure you probably do as well. All the information overload just created a lot more confusion than clarity. And that's kind of the red flag here. It means that we're asking the wrong questions. So I'd say the real problem here for somebody like John is lack of structure. So if we're asking the wrong questions, then what's the right question? It's not, well, how much do I have? Did I hit that target where I, quote, have permission to retire? It's what is this money actually going to do for me today and 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now in varying environments through all the different life changes that we may not even anticipate. And for John, that 4.1 million amount looks solid until we remember that almost all of his balance is pre-tax. So anything that he withdraws is going to count as mostly taxable income to him, which is going to have a ripple effect on his Medicare cost, his Medicare Part B and D premiums, future RMDs, and eligibility for other tax savings throughout his lifetime. So he didn't really fear going broke in year one or even year 5 because he felt like he had a good amount of money. He just feared making bad choices that might lead to regret 10 to 15 years later. And I find that's what really freezes retirees, not really the math, it's just the uncertainty of how all the pieces work together and what they should actually be thinking of and prioritizing. And if you've done a lot of the reading, if you followed the rules and accumulated a good amount of money, and you still don't feel clear about it, you're not alone. That's exactly why I'm making the video. If you'd like to get a little bit more personalized guidance with it, feel free to click the link in the description below the video where I go over my total retirement process, which is a lot more in depth than what I can cover in this video, but it shows you how I approach retirement, what I include into it, and there'll be a link to book a call with me. If I can help, just let me know. Glad to do it. And so now let's get back to the uncertainty for John and what that actually does. So he delayed retirement by over 3 years, just in the habit of accumulating more, not because he needed more. I mean, we know that he didn't, but he just couldn't pick, quote, the number, right? What was the magic number? The 4 million felt good, but in all honesty, he could have retired long before that. But when someone's in that kind of state that John was in, the paralysis by analysis, then everything takes on more of an emotional weight. Every market dip was more fear, can't retire, got to accumulate more. Every new video that he watched or every new piece of information he consumed on taxes or withdrawal strategy, more doubt. This video contradicted the one I just watched a second ago, so now I have to watch more. So it just created a constant cycle of doubt, and he was very discouraged. And that's what I think a lot of people miss. So having a good amount of money without structure doesn't really create peace. It just creates more anxiety because it feels like there's a lot more at stake and they don't want to screw it up. Because when there's no system, every decision takes on a lot more weight and it feels like it's permanent and you can't get errors back. And so that stress usually continues to build and build. Eventually it forces a bigger question. How do I know what my money can actually support without having to second guess every single decision that I'm making or have to find something to confirm that I'm making the right decision? And this is what I'm going to break down next. So let's talk about what really determines safe or safer spending. So this is where we slow things down a little bit and try to solve the problem, because calculators can give you generic answers. I mean, you have to start somewhere, right? So you have to model something just so you have a base to make adjustments off of, but they rarely give you confidence because life changes and markets change. So when John was sitting across the table from me, here's where we wanted to start. And so number one, we want to start with that withdrawal rate reality. What actually makes sense realistically at age 62 with 30 plus years potentially to go in retirement? And I've talked about withdrawal rates, realistic withdrawal rates, maximum withdrawal rates in other videos. I'll put some of that research up on the screen here so you can see it. So depending on how you're invested, the risk you want to take, meaning how much you have allocated to stocks versus bonds and cash, that's going to be the big determinant on how much you can possibly pull off. If you're the type that wants to maximize everything in retirement, if you want to, quote, die with zero, or if you want to spend more conservatively, leave money to your children, this is where all the personalized and individual customization comes in. But realistic withdrawal rates can range from 3 to 7, sometimes 8 or 9% in given years, as long as it's monitored, cut back later. So there's a way to customize this just depending on what you want to do and how retirement goes. But for John, it made sense to somewhere around the 5% range. Number two, we want to look at the after-tax income. What does, let's say, $12,000 a month or $15,000 a month look like after taxes? So a lot of retirees will not take the full account of taxes into their withdrawals. Number three, how are we going to handle early market drops? How do you avoid locking in losses or panicking, deviating from the plan if things start to look a little bumpy in the markets? We know dips are going to come. We know bear markets are going to come, but we want to have a plan in there so we know exactly how we're going to react. How much are we going to cut spending if we have to? What's the floor? For example, is that floor $5,000 a month, $6,000 a month? How low can we go where you're still comfortable in retirement? You don't have to cut everything out, but we want to know when we can make those adjustments, because that's the critical factor to not actually running out of money, is being able to make those adjustments when we need to. Number four is we want to talk about RMD, required minimum distribution pressure. How does forced income at age 73 or 75, how's that going to affect tax exposure? Do we want to get ahead of some of that now? Do Roth conversions make sense for John? That's something that we wanted to map out. Number five is Social Security timing. How does timing reduce some of that long-term pressure? Obviously, if you take Social Security earlier, it's going to take some of the pressure off your portfolio. For some people, that mental and emotional relief is worth taking Social Security early. Others say, no, I just want to look at the mathematical and take the mathematical approach. I want to take my Social Security later. Maybe you want to use those years to do some advanced tax planning. As I mentioned a second ago, Roth conversions can fit well in that space if that's a strategy that makes sense. But that's something that we definitely want to gauge the impact of. And then number 6 kind of goes back to number 3 with the market drops, is spending flexibility. So this is the true engine of retirement resilience. We need to have that flexibility. We need to know how we're going to bake that into the plan, what John can tolerate. Again, setting that floor, also setting the higher limits as well. If markets do really well, we spend a lot of time talking about the negative scenarios. Most of the market scenarios are to the positive, right? Most years are positive. So if John gains more in his investment accounts, what are we going to do with that extra money? How are we going to use that to add value to his life? So all these things are what separates theory from mastery and having an actual plan. These aren't just inputs, these are levers. And when you pull the right ones, or when you pull the right ones in the right order, it can really change everything else. And now, how can we take some of this complexity and actually use it to make decisions where we're specifically talking about spending? Well, that's where guardrails comes in. And I've talked about many other withdrawal approaches before, and I've talked about guardrails as well, but guardrails is a simple way to look at it that makes sense for a lot of people. So using guardrails works like this. Guardrails is a rule-based system that adjusts spending based on real results. So I think of it like cruise control for retirement income. So if you're starting to take a certain amount, let's say this example, it makes it pretty easy, $1 million, 5%, 50,000. If the markets go up a certain amount, then you can get a pay raise, bump that annual income up. If markets drop, then we can decrease the amount. And that goes back to the other steps I was talking about before about what that floor is. So sometimes that decrease can be very small. Sometimes it can be bigger, just depending on, the comfort of how much income you actually need. But the reason this works is that it gives retirees permission to spend and protects in downturns. And behaviorally, it removes that decision fatigue of, should I spend or should I not spend, and just replaces it with a system. So it can be more or less, as I mentioned before, cruise control or autopilot. You don't have to go through all that decision fatigue of, well, the market's down, I can't spend, because we have the plan that says, well, hey, we already knew this situation was coming. Here's how much exactly that we can spend. Sometimes you may not even have to have a big drop. It just depends on how we map this out. There's actually quite a few ways to map out a guardrail strategy. I'm just giving a simple version so it's easy to walk through. But the key is that it takes a lot of that pressure off. And so for John, after accounting for taxes, volatility, flexibility, his safe spending range landed on somewhere around $12,000 a month after taxes, at least at the beginning. And this is something that we'll modify year by year. Some years he might spend a lot more. Some years he might spend a little less. But the key is that it's flexible. It's providing a system. He knows what to expect. And all that provides a lot more clarity. And not because 4.1 million isn't enough. It probably should be, as I mentioned before. But as I said, even without structure, even big numbers can be fragile, and there can be a lot of uncertainty there. And so the real risk for John, or anyone who has a larger balance like 4.1 million, isn't necessarily just running out of money. It's losing confidence and having all that stress and uncertainty, decision fatigue. And the way to fix that is by turning your money into a system. And if you've listened this far and you're wondering, hey, that sounds great, I'd like to learn more about this, feel free to click the link in the description below the video. It'll take you to a page where I go over my entire retirement process, where I talk a little bit about this and how I incorporate it into everything else. And there'll be a link there to book a call with me. If I can help, just let me know. Glad to do it. As always, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.